is when you were talking about Yost, as a character that I play, Cheryl, she died at 35 of heart failure. And when we heard that, we were just like shocked. Me and my mom.
Very small room, and she physically put me in the bed next to this undressed man who was very famous and had his hands like this.
I was in my mid-20s.
Right.
The first time I really came over here. You know, I had a whole bunch of weird paranoid suspicions about what the hell was going on because there was a lot of stuff I couldn't understand.
Right.
And nobody was really bothering to explain it to me.
They don't.
And I formed a bunch of...
One of the most disturbing problems in our world today is human trafficking, and particularly the children.
It's barely even been a week since Hayden Panettiere tragically lost her life. And it looks like the police are already closing in on their very first arrest. Now, this all comes after Mel Gibson came out and completely exposed Hayden's ex-boyfriend, Steve Jones, claiming he has major info on the exact people who took her out. When the news first broke about Hayden's passing, they tried to tell us there was no foul play involved, with some reports even trying to brush it off like it was just an OD. But all the evidence coming out since then seems to point to her being unalived by the very same industry elites who forced her into when she was younger. And word is Mel Gibson is taking this super personally and handing over major evidence to help crack this case. According to him, all of this ties right back to Epstein and that massive ring he was running. Now, unless y'all have been living under a rock, you've definitely heard about Hayden's passing by now. According to official reports, first responders rushed over to a residence in Greenville, South Carolina on Sunday after getting a 911 call, where they found Hayden unresponsive and going into cardiac arrest. Paramedics initiated advanced cardiac life support measures, but sadly none of it worked, and she was pronounced deceased, y'all. The coroner's office reported that her autopsy was completed on Monday, claiming no signs of trauma were discovered that would have contributed to the death. Well, that was until all this recent evidence linking her death back to Epstein's circle got exposed. Turns out when Hayden was only 18 years old, she was allegedly tricked into pulling up to one of Epstein's parties and forced to participate in some real nasty stuff that she wanted absolutely no part of. Matter of fact, reports are saying that's when she really started experimenting with heavy substances just so she could numb herself to everything being done to her. Hayden actually revealed before that she was first exposed when she was only 15 years old by a trusted adult in her life at the time, and that good-for-no adult literally lied to her and called them happy pills. They would shove them right down her throat every time she got sad or had a hard time dealing with what was happening to her at those parties. And soon enough, she became completely dependent on them because it was the only way she could cope. Who was somebody who was on my team that I was working with came to me, and it was before this red carpet, and I had been doing heroes, and we did press all the time, and I was a little low energy, and it was, here, take one of these, it's a happy pill, give you energy, so I didn't think of it at the time as like a bad thing. Or how old were you? I was 16, and it must have been something. That was similar to like an et al, but they got it from Mexico. I should have thought that's so sketchy, but I didn't, because I trusted the person. And it did give me that little bit of energy, and I didn't feel like high and out of control. But I did feel like happy and like I was looking forward to doing the life of the party interview. Yes. Now, back when Hayden first opened up about her struggles, she didn't really get into the details of what was actually pushing her to use those substances in the first place. Well, that was until about 2 months ago when she sat down for an interview to promote her memoir and finally dropped everything. She revealed that someone who was supposed to be a trusted adult in her life was actually forcing her to lay up with older industry executives against her will. And listen, folks are convinced that this so-called trusted adult is the exact same person who started pumping her full of those happy pills the second her mental health started spiraling from all that trauma. Wasn't until I found myself in predicaments that I realized, my perspective completely shifted, and I realized that I was in danger. But by the time I'd realized I was in danger, I was quite literally out to sea. That moment. So, according to Hayden, her very first encounter with Epstein's crew happened while she was out on a boat with that trusted adult and a group of other industry folks. This so-called adult ended up taking her into a room where an industry executive was just lying up in the bed completely naked, expecting her to sleep with him. Hayden said she ran right out of that room screaming at the top of her lungs for help, but every single person on that boat completely ignored her. And since they were literally out in the middle of the ocean, she had nowhere to run. So from there, y'all can pretty much fill in the blanks on the awful stuff that happened next. Put me in the bed next to this undressed man who was very famous and had his hands like this. Like this was just, an average day for him, and this is something that was like, this is not happening. But I had nowhere to hide, and I bolted and I hid wherever I could think of to hide on a boat. There was no jumping off and swimming away, and there was nobody who was going to. I realized that there was nobody who was going to be empathetic to my situation, that this was nothing new. Now, as soon as this story popped back up, the internet immediately went into full detective mode, trying to figure out who this so-called trusted adult actually was. And honey, the very first person everybody set their eyes on was former Real Housewives of Beverly Hills star Diana Jenkins. See, right around the time all of this was happening to Hayden, a whole bunch of industry insiders were already putting Diana on blast, claiming she was out here acting as a madam and setting young women up with Epstein and his dirty circle. So when folks dug up old pictures showing Diana and Hayden kicking it together with actual receipts of them on yachts, they did not waste any time dragging her straight into the mess. Now, of course, Diana denied every single bit of it as expected, claiming she's already sued a whole bunch of people for putting those exact allegations on her name. Her said in a statement, "Diana has had to deal with false online rumors before, and sadly, this is just another example of that. So, let me be 100% clear about this. It most certainly is not Diana, and anyone who claims it is her will be sued." Anyway, this was still not enough to convince people that she wasn't involved, but the heat definitely cooled down on her when people found receipts linking Hayden's ex-boyfriend, Steve Jones, to the timeline of all this. They were spotted together on yachts all the time, and that was actually the way people even found out they were dating in the first place. The relationship ended just as fast as it began, with Hayden blaming it on the fact that she lived in LA and he lived in London. But with everything coming out now, people are claiming it's because he might have been the one who exposed her to the Epstein CT world in the first place. In fact, the rumors got worse when people found this blind item from 2022, accusing Steve of making Hayden a regular on Diddy's yacht. Now, mind you, this was in 2022. Cassie's lawsuit against Diddy hadn't even come out yet, so it seems like this blind item really knew what they were talking about. The blind item said, "The Welsh television presenter, who used to hang out with the then very young television cheerleader, was a regular at Diddy's yacht parties." And just to make you understand just how close Steve and Diddy were, Steve literally admitted to saving Diddy from drowning one time while he was on Diddy's boat. And it's believed by a lot of people that Hayden was on the boat as well when this happened. For now claiming that Mel Gibson is working directly with the police to help solve Hayden's case because he believes it's all tied to Epstein. And even though it sounds random to some people, it really isn't when you think about it. Because Mel had been at this for a long time, way before Hayden's death. He has been one of the most outspoken celebrities when it comes to Epstein and the CT rings that are being operated in Hollywood. In fact, back when Michael Jackson was being accused of being a PDF file, there were reports that Mel had reached out to the Santa Barbara police to tell them who the real PDF files were, but they brushed him off. In his own words, I've told the police. I sat there and I gave them the names. They're on record. They have all of this information. Well, this led to people digging deeper into some comments that Mel had made some years ago, flat out trying to tell us about what was going on behind the scenes. Mel didn't just stop at speaking out against CT rings. In 2023, he publicly put everything on blast in his movie Sound of Freedom. The film was supposed to come out in 2018, but it ended up getting shelved for about 5 years, before finally being released in 2023. Word on the street is the higher-ups didn't want that film getting attention because it was putting a spotlight on the exact kind of things they've been benefiting from behind closed doors. And with so many powerful people already being tied to Epstein, Diddy, Weinstein, and all these other shady people, it makes sense why they were working overtime to bury it. But see, at the time, a lot of people completely missed the bigger message behind Sound of Freedom. They thought it was just another movie about CT. But now, with all this Epstein mess coming back up, people are realizing Mel may have been trying to show us something much deeper. And what's crazy is even after all these Epstein files started circulating, some people are still acting clueless. And remember that 1998 interview I mentioned earlier? Well, it was resurfaced right after the recent Epstein files, and it's disturbing to say the least. In it, Mel was going into details about the weird paranoid suspicions about Hollywood's inner workings, when he first moved to California from Australia. Even though he didn't G,